welcome to the Pacific Grove Museum of Natural History. I am Rachel Miller, I'm the Executive Director, and you are here for our very first program that's associated with our Jade Beneath the Sea exhibit. So this is a great way to kick off our programming. To dive into Jade, this is going to be a quarterly program for the first 2 years of Jade Beneath the Sea. The first 2 years are going to focus on Big Sur, Monterey County, and then we're going to kind of spread out into other areas of California, eventually to other places across the United States and across the world. So the intention is for this to be a 5-year exhibition. So this is going to be sort of a teaser to more in-depth programs that we will have in the future. Like we're going to have Marina back, so she can talk lots more about women in Jade. And Ryan about diving, and we want to hear more about mining. So these guys, you're going to see them again, but maybe on their own or maybe in another way they're going to do programming. We also plan on having some artist demos. We want to do some film screenings, so just keep in touch with us because you're going to see some pretty cool stuff coming out with the Jade Beneath the Sea program. All of this was made possible by the Nancy Eccles and Homer Haywood Family Foundation. So we're very grateful to them for generously supporting the exhibit as well as the programming for the next 2 years. Woo-hoo. That's awesome. So we're going to get started. I do not think that this presenter really needs much of an introduction. I think most of you know who Kenny Comello is. I think most of you are related to Kenny. But you know, Kenny has been mining and diving and selling jade, collecting jade for decades. He's kind of a legend when it comes to Big Sur Jade. He coined the term Big Sur Jade. He was one of the co-founders of the Big Sur Jade Festival. And so we're really thankful to have him here to kick off our Jade Beneath the Sea programming. So welcome to Kenny Comello.
So the story starts in the spring of 1970. This is Bill Dunn. Bill was 31 at that time. I was 19. Bill lived in a Volkswagen camper at the end of the 4 miles of dirt road. And I lived 2 miles beyond that old cabin along the creek. Late September of that year of 1970, we had a big wildfire that came through the area called the Buckeye. Bill, myself, and all the people that lived in the area got together, and one at a time we saved the cabins that were there. After the Buckeye passed, Bill went to town and bought himself a book called The Dana's Book of Mineralogy. He also bought a rock hammer, a spring rock hammer. Came back to prospect for Jade. Now, Jade was known to be in the area because a guy named Al Zykowski had come through in the late 60s, prospected all the way up from the ocean, and found several veins of jade along the creek. And Ski wasn't concerned about stake and mining claims. He freely gave them to the people that were living there already. Ski found a vein that was, just beyond this cabin here, which I moved into. The cabin was left over from a mining rush. They had a minor gold rush in southern Monterey County, 1890 to 1920. This is an old hand split. Nobody lived in it in 50 years, but it looked like a castle to me. I've been sleeping on the ground for a while. So Ski found a small vein of bluish jade, and I've heard that the Chinese call jade the stone of heaven. So I named the claim the Blue Heaven. In the meantime, Bill Nunn had been prospecting on the side hills and found 3 different veins of jade. Staked some claims and called them the Black Fir. And that's F-I-R. That's because the fir trees in the area had gotten scorched by the Buckeye fire that had just come through. Bill asked me if I wanted to be a partner. And I said, yeah. So I moved down from the Blue Heaven into a little canvas penthouse. Had a plywood floor, had running water, had a wood stove, but this is the early 70s. It was before solar panels. So we were back to kerosene lamps. And then for a hot shower, we had a big bed with hot water. This is Bill's version of his tent house. He moved on to the Clinton from the Volkswagen camper. And we're about a mile from the nearest road. So you can see here on the side, this is a fir tree here, how black it is. Look. Now, we didn't have any money in 1971. In order to develop a mine, you have to have some equipment. So through some friends of ours, we went to the Carmel Gem and Mineral Society. And through them, we met Henry Ragsdale, old-time rock hound, a respected business person and landowner here in the peninsula. In fact, they named a road for him over on the far side of town. The other partner was Ed Stark. Ed Stark was a stockbroker, lived in Pebble Beach, and he put himself through college, diving for Jade at Jade Cove, pulling out big boulders, selling it to sculptors like Malcolm Rand and Carmel. They agreed to pay $5,000 for 1/3 interest in the Black Fur mines. With that, in the back here, that blue hood there is the hood to a 30-inch diamond saw. That was we spent most of that $5,000 on a saw. But we were a mile from the nearest road, so hauling that saw back there is a whole other story. But now suddenly we could mine jade. You really don't know what jade is when you take it out of the ground when it's rough. You've got to cut or grind a window into it so you can see the color and then see how many fractures it might have. So that allowed us to do it. This was our first shop. Henry Ragsdale gave us a Fran and Tom combination unit. It has a trim saw at this end. It is right there. And then all the grinders and polishers. So now we can take a piece from the mine, cut it on the 30-inch, bring it over to the trim saw, isolate a square inch or two, and make a pendant or a ringstone or whatever. We got the interest of the Forest Service because we were living on the claims. Most people that had mining claims come in, work on the weekend, go home. We were living there. So they weren't too excited about that. They came in to see if we actually had jade. They took samples. It came back as jade. But they also raised a pertinent question. Was it worth anything? Can you sell it? The old original 1872 mining law has a phrase about the prudent man. And the prudent man will not waste his time on a prospect that doesn't show a possibility of making a profit. So that led us to decades of doing gem and mineral shows, craft shows, county fairs, jazz festivals. This is 1973, Monterey Fairgrounds. We had a booth. And if you look up here, the sign says Big Sur Jade. Now, all the books, you look at all the old books, they call our jade Monterey Jade. Bill and I thought, that's not right. Monterey's 65 miles north of here. So we started calling it Big Sur Jade. And 50 years later, now the name is pretty much stuck. When things got tight, or when I needed to, I could always jump on my motorcycle and go down to Pacific Valley, a place on the coast about 7 miles away. And Lee and Rhoda Thompson, who owned it, allowed me to put a little card table out in their parking lot anytime I wanted to sell it to tourists. 1979, we got a chance to lease some property in the back of a small town called Gordon. Now, there wasn't anything there at first. It was just a poison oak covered hillside. I've been diving with Ed Stark about 5 years or so, and I found my first big boulder, about 350-pound piece, that Ed helped me get up and out. We brought it to the shop. Henry Ragsdale supplied a 6-foot diamond drag saw. The beauty of this lease was that they gave us free electricity and free water. Now, that almost decade before, if Bill and I wanted to do something at the mines, we had to go carry in 5 gallons of gas on our back to run our gas motors and our generators. Suddenly now we had a place where all we had to do is plug it in and turn the switch on. So one thing led to another. The shop evolved over a period of time. I had a lot of help, all salvaged wood. After a while, I had 2 6-foot diamond drag saws, 3 40-pound tumblers. I bought another 30-inch diamond saw. Inside under the roof, under the roof there, that was all the grinders and polishers and Fordhams and the more smaller stuff. About that time, this guy showed up, Pink. Jade, Bob, Bill, Nunn, myself, we weren't really artistic. We were miners, we were prospectors, we could process jade, but we didn't really have the touch. We could poke a hole in it and put a piece of leather on it and call it a pendant. Pink showed up and had some artistic tendencies, and he really added to the shop. Here's a photo of one of the saws. You can see that the piece is set in a pile of concrete there. On the bottom of that blade is 1.5-inch segments that are impregnated with diamond. The reciprocating saw goes back and forth. A cut like this would take 2 to 2.5 days to complete, 24 hours a day. So you can see over here, we were making slabs, and we were polishing out slabs and selling coffee tabletops to the tourists. Because after a while, people started, we didn't set up the shop to be retail, we set it up to process jade, but the word got out, even though we were in the back of town. And at first, the rock hounds found us. And then after that, word got around to the jade people, and pretty soon people were coming up saying, how much is this? How much is that? So the shop sort of evolved into a retail besides the processing place. Now at the bottom of the photo, here's a guy named Jade Bob. He was the guy that was there every day. I was a family man. I had to work different jobs to keep the cash flow happening. Jade Bob would open the shop in the morning, keep an eye on the saws, keep an eye on the tumblers, maybe run some slabs off the 30-inch. And if he sold anything, he got 25%. If he didn't sell anything, he got $10. And this was late 70s, early 80s. I mean, $10 buy you a 6-pack of beer, a pack of smokes, and a burrito. He's ready for the next day. Now with Pink's influence, we started spiffing the place up. I went up in the hills and built up some redwood, and we started making better display cases. And we started trying to bring the tourists back up from the highway, because 99% of them never knew we were there. The guy who ran the gas station down in the highway level, this is the highway level looking up. My shop is back up in here, back behind the house over here to the left. But I knew the guy who ran the gas station, and he allowed me to put a sign down there. And then over here, there's a stairway. At first there was just a dirt path going up. It was quite a scramble to get up there. But we knew if we wanted the tourists to come up and spend any money, we had to make it a little better. So we built a stairway, going up. Every stair had a piece of jade in it. When we got up to where it wide, and we made a jade arrow and embedded it in the concrete to send people to the right of the house over here. When you came around the side of the house, here was the jade shop. Now we were there for an order from 1979 to 1993, and the new owner took over the town, and he decided that he'd rather turn the shop into housing for his people. So we moved about 7 miles north to Pacific Valley. But all Pacific Valley had for us was a 10 by 12 room, the old gas station room, so it was strictly retail. So all the big saws, all the polishers, all the 40-pound tumblers and stuff, the 30-inch saw, I had to find new homes for it. I still live in the hills. I still live in the hills today off the grid. But, you know, so I didn't have electricity to run. So they found new homes, and some of them are still working today. This is my shop today. I live 5 miles of dirt road up off the highway. I'm still off the grid, but today I've got solar panels. You know, I've got Wi-Fi. I can make something and put it on the internet. They send me money through the mail. You know, it's like a dream. I don't have to run up and down the coast trying to pedal my Jade. You know, and better yet, I can drive to where I live now. I don't have to hike anymore. Life is good. These are the guys that really helped in the formation. Steve, who found the original Jade deposits. Ed Stark and Henry are partners, original partners on the Black Fur. Don Waber, Ernie Porter, 2 professional Jade divers that I had the privilege of working with over the years. Jade Bob, who was the day-to-day guy at the Jade shop. Many people thought Jade Bob owned the shop and didn't know who Kenny was. You know? Pig, our resident artist. Tom Clifford and Loose Tooth Bruce, buddies of mine that helped build the shop and the stairway coming up. Kurt McGranahan was one of the guys that helped us start the original Black Fur Jade mines back up in the hills. Now, we started a show in 1991 in Florida called the Big Sur Jade Festival. And we're going to have, that show still is happening. We're going to have the 29th annual festival in Harmony in a couple weeks, October 10, 11, 12. Harmony is about 5 miles south of Cambria. We also started a show here in Monterey called the Monterey Bay Jade Festival, and it happens the first week of June right here at the Custom House Plaza at the base of the wharf. So that takes the history from 1970 to 1995, and now we're continuing on, and Big Sur Jade seems to have stuck. Thank you.
Our next presenter, I'm really excited to have Marina here. Because she came all the way from the desert, Mojave Desert. She came like 400 miles to be part of this program, so like, that's awesome. She calls herself a Jade shaper.
I'm not good enough to be called a carver.
Yeah, she's an artist. I think you're an artist. I'm pointing at this. And she's an educator. She's a filmmaker. She has some films, some DVDs over here. So I'll let her tell you about those films. And you say, chef. But she is currently exploring and creating in the Upper Mojave Desert, and she came all the way here to be part of this program. So let's welcome up Marina Shoupe. Thank you.
Do I need that microphone, you guys?
No, you're good.
Yeah, I'm pretty loud. Hi, it's nice to see you all. My first question when Rachel called me, it's like, why me? And I can go back into you. Help me. I can't find the first question. Anyway, why I think I was asked to be here is I do work with stone. I do work with jade. I'm actually more of a, like I said, I call it a shaper rather than a very intricate carver. And I think I designed other things in my life, and carving may not be my sweet spot right now. When I first was introduced to stone cutting, I knew immediately that making cabochons, you know, those little dome things you put in rice, was just going to bore the frack out of me. And so I kind of tend towards functional, usable items because it just makes more sense. I'm a recycler, you know, let's use it. And so there's some hair sticks I just started playing with. Turquoise, the shafts are all jade, but I make different toppers, some jade, some other things. But that's just a visual candy for you all. I quickly go through a 1-minute bio. I do teach in the high desert at the high Mojave Desert, where you have snow on cactus a couple times a year, which is visually surreal, but you know, then it melts. And I do like day workshops. You leave with a pendant in 4 to 6 hours, and it's fabulous. I've also produced 7 lapidary tutorials, and 2 of them are with Western master carvers Dunsalt and Deborah Wilson, and they're on the Shameless Commerce table. And what else? I think my strength in the Jade community is making connections, connecting people together. I was given Friends of Jade a few years ago, and I'm still trying to figure out what to do with that, because when it was formed in the 30s, it was monthly men would meet in Britain, and then Fred Ward had it for a long time. He was sending out paper, mimeographed and Xerox newsletters with info. And in the digital age, I just haven't figured out what to do with it yet, but I'm thinking. My sweet spot and my superpower is supporting the community and bringing people together. And I was thrilled to be asked to, we kind of landed on Women in Jade, because I know a lot of them. And that's another teaser for the desert. Anyway, there are a lot of carps in the West, and here are some of the women I know. And we've got Deborah Wilson. She lives in Canada, and she works in, she does small wearables, but also monumental. That piece, when she got the rough stone, it's about this tall. And when she got the rough stone, she had to cut off 150 pounds to get to the heart of that piece to do this. And it's in a private public park somewhere in Vancouver. It's absolutely stunning. And her finishes are just sweet. And that's a pendant of hers that I think that was her entry piece for one of the Jade symposiums up with the brothers. Yeah, a couple, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. She's just fabulous. She also teaches, you can go to her house for a week and learn how to carve. And she cooks your lunch. I mean, it's sweet combo. This is Madeline Gordon. She's French, but she lives in New Zealand. Her background is sculpture. Am I talking too fast? Good. I practiced this last night with some friends in Santa Cruz, and the champagne sped me up. So I'm trying to just enunciate for all of you. Maddie, I met her when she came to China a few years ago at an exhibition that Westerners have been invited to the last 12 years. She took a gold the first year she was there. She's an innovative and kind of fearless designer. She's recently, that's one of her leaves, and that's like pendant size. And she's recently been learning silversmithing, and so she's doing some incredible framing of jade she's carved in silver. She's innovative. And I don't have any of her silver images here, but this is a lovely pendant brooch. Let's bring back the brooch. And it's a taller piece, it's about this tall, it's just sweet. It's almost like a tomatillo, anyway, it's just, she's wacky and wonderful, and she's great. And this is another New Zealander, Sharon Painter Arts, and she finds fun with work. She's got a full-time job in a museum, but she also takes time to just goof with jade. And that's not all jade, there's agate in there and some marble, but there's a lot of jade. And that's just, and those are like lipstick size. They don't go up and down. But this is a bra. This is a bra that's based on, have any of you seen the Chinese burial suit? I think it's Chinese. Yeah, it's Chinese. It's based on, so each one of those rectangles is mitered tightly together and then laced. Probably uncomfortable, but lovely and just having fun. Here's another one. Want a good dance here? So I mean, her stuff is really fun, wearable, but not really. She's a delight. She's very fun. Sandy Ham, she's local. She's not here. She's on vacay. Her work, it's been wonderful watching her work grow, and she's part of the Jade exhibit in the next room, so please go look. And that's just a sweet piece. And Sherry Stuckey, she's new to me, but I've seen her the last couple shows. And what I like about her work is a lot of her pendants are large, and that's just, I just like that risk. Am I in? No, I care for root beer earrings. Anyway. So Christy Vaca, she may be in the room, and she's one of the newer local artists. And what I love about Christy is 4 or 5 years ago she was buying rough from me, and now she's carving me out of the water. And it's just for me, I really have a philosophy of when one of us does well, we all do well, and it's just wonderful to see her artistry evolve and just rock it. Though I did do kelp 3 years ago. I've seen a lot of kelp since I did the first kelp. All right, Ziggy wrote it out. She used to live here, and then she went away, and she came back, she went away. But what I like about Ziggy, and again, it's just like, I guess if you're doing it full time, you get better. But I know it's a cribbage board. But she's also making the bases out of burl, and she's making guitar picks, and with rhodonite, and for all Canadian, Jade, Siberian, and Canadian rhodonite, it looks like. And she's having fun. It's a Guatemalan Jade. But it's just, she's just doing it and watching her superpower come into bloom. Julianne Cohen, she's up in Washington. It's a lovely octopus pendant. Yeah. And she's there's a medium carving symposium that happens up there every year, and she's been part of that. That's a beautiful four-leaf clover pendant. Isn't that, the color of that is just exquisite. Art and Anna, they actually do share with us at Monterey. And what I like, they're more silversmiths, but they've been really framing Jade in unusual ways. How that cutout in the silver gives you that beautiful lotus design. And you can find them they'll be at the Harmony Show and also at Monterey, but beautiful Guatemalan. But they just, another thing they've been doing is they push using stones that not everyone uses. Like, not a lot of people use Clear Creek because you can't see through it. And, you know, they love Porterville, the stuff with the orange freckles. I mean, they're just thinking beyond what's always done. And I'm really, yay for them, yay for that. They live up in the high desert a couple miles from me. They're fast. And Charlotte. Charlotte is not a maker of stone, she's a designer. We were in New Zealand, and there's a picture of us in New Zealand. Charlotte's got a piece of rock. But I bring her in because she's a poet. She and her husband wrote issue 1 and 2 of the Jade book that's over here on the Shameless Commerce table. And then she re-edited the 3rd edition, which actually brought in contemporary Chinese, North American carvers, people we know and love that are in this room. And she's just been one of the most supportive Jade community people I've ever met in my life. Would you agree? And she's gorgeous, look at her. And we're going to China. I just threw this in because it's really beautiful. And it's about 13, 14 inches tall. It's 2 millimeters thick, completely hollow. Can you not see her body in that? I mean, it's just, whoever made it is, anyway, that's just eye candy for you guys. Okay, I know 2 female carvers, women carvers in China. Dong Lihua, she's my friend, and she's fabulous, and she carves pendants and other things, but she really has a fixation on food. There's a mooncake. It's just a gorgeous life-size mooncake. That's like 4.5 by 1.5, anyway, it's gorgeous. There are little nuggets, again, life-size and leggings. He writes on a leaf. The leaf is not Jade, but she just plays with food. And this she had at that exhibit a few years ago. And it is a slice of bread, size slice of bread, and I asked her how many burrs it took her to make all those holes in the bread, and she said 430 feet. Oh, she's fabulous. And she is that friendly. That's just, she's watching hard. This is a master carver in China that I found before Andrew found. And she, from what I know, well, I don't have time to go to it. There's a master carver thing, and you can, or master painter, the arts are celebrated differently in China than they are here. And she is one of 2 female master carvers I know in China, and I think there's like 2,000 of them. So the ratio is pretty sucky. But I've interviewed both of these women for a film project I've been working. There's a couple of examples of tea leaf work. A beautiful peony. Look at that. That piece is about 3 inches tall. Wow. But light is so hard to see. I think, how can you work it? And this piece I love. Little bamboo leaf, little spider. Just, and it's about, the piece is about that big. Just exquisite. But I interviewed both of these women, and I asked them, why do you think there are so few women working with Jade in China? Oh, well, it's just such a heavy rock, women can't hold it. And that's like such a party bullshit. And it's never in Chile a couple years ago. So how I have seen a lot of women usually the ones that are cutting it, sanding it, grinding it, selling it. In China, there's a designer, somebody else is cutting it, somebody else grinds it, and there are rooms of these all over the place. They seem to be well paid, but they're sanding. They've got little silicone sanding sticks and water, and that's their job, is they're sanding pendants for other people. And there's a woman working in a master carver's making a pendant. You know, it was designed, she's cutting it. And this woman has a little shop and she just made holes and things for bangles or cups or bowls. That's what she did. All day long. We're moving to Guatemala because the time is ticking. Now that I've been told that I'm coming back.
No, go ahead.
No. Some of this stuff I'll deep dive into another time.
But you gotta talk about Mary Lou.
I'm not stopping. I just have a paragraph here I'm gonna develop. I have more. Anyway, Guatemala. Yes. Now, see, I think in China and sometimes in the West, because I've been told many times that, quote, you're a girl, how do you know this isn't Jade? A lot of times, and I'm 60, I'm not a girl, but, and so sometimes, and I'm sure some women in this room can relate to, sometimes we just have to put our heads down and do what we know is right, because there's no talking. These are two women that have never put their heads down. And so I don't have time to get into the history of Mary Lou on the left, tall and stately. She and her husband moved to Guatemala in the early 70s, got a bunch of mining claims. He was a geologist, she's an archaeologist. They knew there was jade in Guatemala. Government just went, sure. And they found it. And instead of sending it to China, they brought carvers to teach the Guatemalans to re-embrace their culture that was washed away by 200 years of bad presidents, military, the United States, anyway. And there are plenty of books. Stone of Kings is a great book you might want to look for. And this is Raquel Perez. And she was hired by Mary Lou's husband when she was 17. They sent her to business school. She's 52 now, and she's the heir apparent. What I love about these women is they are fearless. Because, I mean, right now, I can't get into it right now. Ask me a question about Guatemala doing
And
it.
Mary Lou came to the museum. She came and saw the opening of the Jade beneath the
We
sea.
did, well, you opened the door for us.
I know, it was
Monday
awesome.
morning.
You brought her.
We have pictures, we have picture proof. They do not keep their heads down. And right now, it's exceedingly dangerous because the narcos and the Chinese this company just surface collects. They'll go down 4 feet, anything they can do with the shovel they'll do. But I saw video, I was there in February, and I saw video Rachel showed me of whole mountaintops just getting cut off in the jungle in Guatemala. And little tractors going up and down, and you get paid so much for whatever you find. And it's just, it's rape and pillage of another beautiful place. And it's just so sad. The great news is this, in 3 weeks, in October sometime, be the 4th annual Latin American Jade Carving Congreso in Antigua. And this year they've opened it up to the world of carvers. The first 3 years was just Mexico and South. And the rules were Mexico and South, but you had to carve with Guatemalan jadeite. And they put you all up. Top 3 winners get good cash prizes. And they make it a cultural event. 2.5 days, you get taken places to see things you would never see if you were a tourist. Because Mary Lou's lived there for like 60 years. And it's just a force for good. It's just, I love seeing forces for good in this world. And that's in Mary Lou's yard. Anyway, in their Jade mine, they've got 2 factories and they've got maybe 8 or 10 retail outlets in Mexico and Guatemala. Maybe they're going on first. In every one, they have a museum-style timeline with replicas of jadeite through the centuries used for worship ritualish stuff. And they don't have a retail outlet without this educational component, and it's fabulous. They always do lectures and share, and that's one of their factories. I don't understand why it's painted that color. And the lovely woman is making some beads. And this is an example. This is one of their claims where they actually just opened up a second factory in Airbnbs. You can go there, hang out for a week, and make a bunch of pendants and ride horses. We went there last year, and that's Raquel, the heir apparent, showing a pit, and it was maybe 4.5 feet deep. Pieces of jade. these are some of the artists from last year's Congreso. And this is one of the artists. She's also the factory chairperson, factory forewoman at the Jade factory in Antigua, Sani, and that was her piece from last year. And that is one of her pieces. It's a pendant. Look at the corners. It's just so beautiful. Yeah, it's just sweet. And this was another woman that Lisevia also had. She doesn't work at Jade Maya, but her work is lovely. And different. That was like 300 pieces. You know, each one carved and then glued onto she carved out a wooden form. Crazy. Yeah, she likes puzzles, I think. The last word. This was something I saw in China a few years ago, and I loved it. Thank you.
He spent a lot of time with Don Waller, wrote a series of articles for the Monterey Herald, correct?
Right.
And so he's going to talk about his experiences diving with Don. So we're
Yeah.
looking forward to that. Excellent. Welcome, Ryan.
Actually, what I'll do mostly is talk about Don, because he was a tremendously special human being. And I think a lot of people here knew him. You know, I see a lot of familiar faces here. You know, some really good friends. It's nice to be back here. A little emotional for me, to be honest with you. He's been gone 11 years now. And he meant a lot to me, and for a lot of different reasons. He was far more than just a Jade diver. He was a poet and a writer, a beatnik, an ex-businessman, a middle-aged Freudian, a scuba diver, underwater filmmaker, a marine biologist, a spiritual golem, a fun-loving criminal, a happy Sisyphus, a master sculptor, a Jungian mystic, and a teacher. Yeah, he was a lot of different things to a lot of people, but to me, he was all of these things. Prankster. And a prankster. This man knows well. This is one of his main diving partners here, John Haley. We were talking about probably saved his life 4 times. I met Don. I was the first inaugural poet in residence for the city of Pacific Grove in 2002. That's how real lucky for me to end up in Pacific Grove. My son had just been born. He was born in 2002. It was a great opportunity for me just to focus on writing. And I think I went into the library. I can't remember exactly how I met Don. I was trying to remember. It was either I found the book, or I may have got assigned to go interview him because of one of his pieces. I forget. But we hit it off immediately. And I was really blown away. When he was in his early 20s, he was publishing Poetry Magazine with, no less than William Carlos Williams. I mean, he was really talented guy and a very, gifted writer, gifted storyteller. The dude had stories like you wouldn't believe. Everything from, gray whales to white sharks to treasure hunting. So we go out and dive. For the Monterey Herald, we dove shipwrecks. We dove out for halibut. We come up with these ideas, like, what should we do this week? And he always had some idea, and off we'd go. And I always learned something from the guy, he scared the hell out of me a lot too, to be honest with you. But he was just an incredibly curious guy. And not just curious in going out and looking for physical things, very spiritual, very curious intellectually, and always writing in some way or another. So if you have not read it, Jade Needs to See is kind of a classic book. At this point, it's really hard to find. It's like $150 on eBay. You can go to the internetarchive.com, and you can check out their electronic version. And a lot of what I'm going to pull from today is from that book, because it's really kind of a masterwork in a lot of ways. And there's a reason why it's hard to get. But these are just 2 examples of the kind of stuff he wrote. He was just really prolific in that sense. He was a beatnik, and he was from the silent generation. He wasn't a hippie, right? He was older than that. He was the age of my dad, really. And, they're kind of a different breed. And he started out life. He was joining the family business, at a printing business in San Francisco, and he really chafed under that, right? It wasn't like what he wanted to do, but he did it because he was, he had a family at the time, and he was a responsible dude. And you know, at the same time, like he was writing poetry, you know, and getting published in Poetry Magazine. He was, you know, introduced to skin diving, which was a very early, you know, sport at the time. And he was diving Moss Beach, south of San Francisco, for abs, and you know, really kind of early on was in the ocean, and this picture cracks me up. Those pants are definitely rubber on. But you know, and this is just an example of his writing. You know, he was really, I mean, if you read the book, he really had a great voice. And you know, which is, if you write, you know, you probably know it's not easy to write good prose, right? I mean, this guy could sing. He was really a great writer. So, you know, he was a beatnik in that sense. His mind wasn't in the family business, to say the least, right? He was already thinking about getting out, the adventure, the ocean, you know, going down south. He was introduced to Jade by some friends. And, you know, at the age of 44, he's like, yep, I'm out of here, right? His kids weren't interested in the publishing business, so he's like, all right, screw it. I'm going to Monterey, and I'm going to go dive for Jade full time. And that's what he did. Then he went back to school as well, and while he was at school, so this is sort of, he always, when you hung out with him, it was always really pretty interesting the sources he would pull from, right? And in the book he references a lot of stuff. Young and Freud were, you know, at the time, obviously in the 50s, this was kind of like, everyone was sort of thinking this way, but he really, you know, took a lot of this into his life. And, you know, so when he went and left the family business and decided to go pursue Jade, it was really like this, you know, he was about wish fulfillment, right? And he was always afraid of, like, you know, if you don't deal with the unconscious, right, it'll show up in weird ways in your life. You know, he and I always kind of laughed about that kind of stuff. You know, there were periods, you know, when we were hanging out where I was having issues, right? And I remember running into an elephant seal, you know, out there in Jade Cove, and which is a tremendously scary thing to run into, you know, especially when you're not expecting it. Because they're really big and they're really curious and they want you out. It was in February, so it was mating, and chased me out of there. But he was always really, you know, he always liked to tell me, well, that's because you're not dealing with this part of your unconscious. But he was a great guy, and you know, like I said, he was a really early scuba diver. You know, fearless, this dude. Fearless, and he used like ancient equipment. It was terrifying. And we were talking about, like Haley and I were talking about this. We went and dove. The one dive I remember more than probably anything else that scared me the most was we went and dove Monastery. And if you're familiar with Monastery, it's a very deep dive to begin with. You know, it goes 90 to 100 feet, and then you get to this ledge, and it just drops off into oblivion, a mile. Right? There's a trench out there, there's nothing out there, just void. And so he and I dove that one day, and he was got this old horse-colored BC, and everything's creaking, and then, you know, it's like, you know, we went and we descended down there, and you can't spend very much time down there at that depth, right? But remember, we went out to the very edge of the trench, and we sat there and kind of looking out at this thing, and I remember the look on his face, he was just rapt, and you could just see his eyes, and I kept flashing him with the flashlight, and I was ready to go again. You know, and he loved it down there. I mean, and he looked into the void, you know, the void was looking right back at him, and he loved it, you know? I mean, I was pissing myself. And so we made it, remember we made the ascent, I'll never forget this. You know, I had to stop a couple times to get back up there, and we get finally back to the surface, and I'm like, thank God the sun, and he whips off his mask and goes, we made it! And I'm like, Jesus, John, we're supposed to make it. I was like, hey, he's in his 70s at this time, right? I mean, he's an old man, you know? I mean, that's what hanging out with him was like, you know? He was really incredible. So when he went back to school, he went back to marine biology. And in totally Don Wobber, you know, character, he became really good at that. And he became good at it because he traded a piece of rock for a camera and got into underwater filming. And when he was out there diving, he wasn't just diving around looking for stuff, he was really examining things. And he noticed that all these sea stars were, you know, fighting. They were like bouting, right? They were, you know, and at that point, like most people considered sea stars as like these brainless animals that just fed, right? And he noticed, and he set up his camera, and I think it wasn't off the breakwater, and he set up time lapse and started studying these things on his own. And he got film that proved that these things were actually fighting over territory and had all these behaviors that were, very sophisticated. And he worked with a guy named John Pierce, and they ended up being profiled. This is maybe how I met him, now that I think about it. I think it may have been a Monterey County Weekly story that I got assigned or something like that. But they ended up doing a PBS series about, John Pierce, who was a very well-established meteorologist who worked with sea stars, I forget the word for it, echinoderms or whatever. But they worked together, and PBS did a documentary about Don's work, which is just one small chapter of this guy's life. And I just kind of want to illustrate, like, he was really a Renaissance man. He was in the truest sense of the world. Because he was so curious and really pretty smart dude. Even though he always like all of his stories, man, they're always kind of like him against, as like a sort of the fool, all right, in the ocean kicking his ass, or then but it wasn't always, if you really listen to the subtext of his story, he was kind of always talking about God, in a lot of ways. He taught me a lot, taught me a lot. But he was also a spiritual God, right? And if you've ever dove for Jade, and you've ever found a really good piece of Jade, then you know what I'm talking about. It's just like, it clenches you in the soul. You're just like, oh my God, it is so beautiful. And I found this at the bottom of the ocean, And of course, he took it like way too far. Like early on, he just went so far out there. With his mind, it's like, well, why do we have to get like little pieces of jade? Let's go get these big freaking size of car pieces of jade. Well, and the end result is him and his buddies. And this is why you should read this book. I'm not going to do it justice, but the book really captures like how crazy this was, right? And this is like, they went out there with these floats. They built these floats. They had these inflatable, bags, and they went down there and chained them to these rocks, and, it took 6 months to get this one-piece nephropod out. And, he got this piece that's in the Oakland Museum now, and it's massive, right? This huge piece of rock. First thing they do, what do? They put it on they clean it up, they put it on the back of a truck, and they drive it through Chinatown, right? And just start this riot. And, a couple days later, the state's on them, about to sue them, trying to get the rock back, and and if you read the book, you'll find out what happens. He ends up donating the stone to the nephropod to the Oakland Museum. But it's a great story. It's epic. And this is he had this idea, and this is one of his sculptures. It's one of the few pieces he did that was also figurative, I think. But this idea, this happy Sisyphus, Camus, famous from his essay, this idea that the work of just bringing the rocks up, that's the spiritually important part of it. It's not really about the jade. It isn't, it's about doing it, right? And he really embodied that in a lot of ways, He really loved going to Jade Cove, and he did it until he was very old. I gotta move along here. Master sculptor, everyone knows that. What I loved about his work was he just let the lines do the work, right? He really let the sea-worn lines do the talking. A young mystic, we kind of touched on this. He was full of a lot of wisdom, and for me, he was a huge teacher, and in many ways, he would probably be mad if I said it, but he was kind of a guru in some ways, because he was very unconscious. Really conscious. He's a really trippy dude, man. But he was never boring. That's what I loved about him. And I will say this, he's carried, his work is carried on, right? There's a guy in the audience here, Justin Barrett, who probably embodies Wobber's spirit more than anyone I know. He's out there half a mile off Jade Cove doing crazy stuff. And he does it, and I see the same thing in his eyes as I see Walker. He is obsessive, but he's also he's doing it because he loves it. It's the passion, he's a really inspirational guy. Justin Jade, right, at Justin Jade, if you want to check out his work, in his gallery around the corner, I 100% support what he's doing. So check his work out too.